Welcome to the podcast. In this week's episode, we're speaking with founder and CEO of LifeMetrics, David Gorski. David has come up with an app. It's called BestSelf, and it takes an interesting approach to allowing you to get some visibility into the things that you do throughout your day that have a positive or a negative impact. And it does this by posing questions to you throughout the day. I've been using the app for a couple of days now. I think it's fascinating. I think it's a great use of the technology. So we spent some time with David talking about how he came up with this idea and how he's leveraging MongoDB and Mongodb Atlas to help him in his journey to bring this to the public. So I hope you enjoy the episode.
You're listening to the Mongodb Podcast. Mongodb Podcast? Exploring the world of software development, data, and all things MongoDB. And now your hosts, Michael Lynn and Nick Raboy.
David, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you participating in the discussion. I'm really excited to learn more about BestSelf and what you're up to.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wouldn't mind just give the audience a brief introduction. Who are you?
As you said, I'm David Gorski. I'm actually a physics PhD student at the moment. I took a gap year between finishing my undergrad and my graduate program. And in that year, I've developed an app in this company, BestSelf. So now I'm kind of getting back to my PhD program. And I'm also working on pursuing BestSelf as much as I can.
Outstanding. And how did you come to the MongoDB for Startups program?
I think I'm maybe a bit unique in the developer space. I'm kind of a no SQL native. I learned like a tiny bit of SQL in my schooling, but almost every project I've ever done has been using NoSQL. So really, it was a no-brainer for me to pursue using a NoSQL database for BestSelf when I started working on it. And I've used to run my own MongoDB instances, but I just found that was a really tedious thing to do, and scaling it's pretty difficult to do as a one-man developer team, you know? When you start running into scaling issues, it's not great. And so I really just looked out for what was out there on the market, and I came around MongoDB Atlas, and I used it for a while, not even knowing there was a startup program. But as I got more and more serious about BestSelf, and I took a year out of everything to focus on it exclusively, I found out, I think, through the Segment startup program, they had a little deal book link in there. And so I applied, and it's been a fantastic journey with you guys so far.
So you went. So you're calling yourself, I'm going to use the term NoSQL native, is what I think you said.
Yeah.
Did you go directly into MongoDB? Was that your first NoSQL database, or did you explore others in the process as well?
I explored, I think it's CouchDB. But really, I'd say MongoDB was always the primary choice that I had. It's just the most, robust from what I've seen. Is the most entrenched, most well-established NoSQL database out there. I've also, I'm not even sure if this qualifies as NoSQL, but back when we were starting to develop BestSelf, we experimented a little bit with Realm, and that was before MongoDB even ended up acquiring Realm. And so we decided to against using Realm, just because we wanted to use MongoDB, something that we're already comfortable with using.
Great. And tell us a little bit about how you're using MongoDB today with BestSelf.
So MongoDB's running all of our data. So in the BestSelf app, people generate wellness data about themselves. And then we use MongoDB to keep tallies of all of their self-reported scores, as well as their objective health metrics. And what this really allows us to do is be very kind of not loose, but free with the schema. If a certain kind of data type comes along, like, hey, we want to track heart rate. Well, now we can just put in entries for heart rate. We can put in new fields in there that are specific to heart rate data that, say, sleep quality data wouldn't need. So it's a really good experience of using it that way. But we're really using it as our primary database software.
And is it app only, or are you also bundling some type of device or hardware?
So we are an app right now. We're starting a hardware partners program, and we've been reaching out to hardware startups and talking with them since our inception, because we think that a big problem for a hardware health tracking device is the fact that, well, you want to focus on building a great wearable or a great piece of tech, but then you also have to worry about making a decent app, because that's how people are going to interface with it. And so we've really tried to make our infrastructure as robust as possible, because we want to get into things like connecting with wearables out there. We're actually working on an API so that other services can put in their own health tracking or any kind of data, really, so that people can get analysis of that data through our same data analytics pipeline.
So in regards to the rest of your tech stack, what are you using for BestSelf in its entirety?
So we have a native Swift iOS app, and we're also, I think our website's running on Netlify. It's a simple, static website, not a lot going on at the moment. And we've actually been using DigitalOcean for the past year, but we're actually transitioning over to Google Cloud Platform at the moment.
So in terms of the actual technology, so you're using a static website for your front end site. How are you powering like your back end? Are you using any of the uh, drivers for MongoDB? Are you using something else?
So we have a main server that kind of wraps our entire database, and that's what it exposes an API that our app communicates with, and that's all in Node.js. And we're using Mongoose.js, sorry, on that server, and that's really, I think, great way of using MongoDB on Node.js, because it's just so much more intuitive from just the standard Node.js perspective of a developer on there. And then we also do all of our data analytics on a completely separate, disconnected server, and that's running Python. And we're using kind of the standard packages you would expect, like pandas and scikit-py and numpy and things like that.
So I have a few questions. You said that Mongoose is more intuitive, a more intuitive way to develop with Node.js and MongoDB. Is there any particular reasons why that is?
Just the fact that you can deal with documents directly, and it's just you can call a function, and it'll return a list of basically JavaScript objects, and you can then just call a function on those to save them, instead of having to interact with some other kind of, it kind of hides the entire fact that you're working with a database connection. You're basically just manipulating documents on your server, and you don't have to worry about the connection pool all that much or anything like that.
Got it.
And you mentioned Python and Node. Why the separation there?
Yeah, so I'm a JavaScript developer at heart. I love Node, and I've used it for a long time. But unfortunately, it's just the kind of data analysis that we want to do just isn't as robust in Node.js. It's just not there. Python is the de facto language for data analytics, and for good reason. Pandas is really a robust package. They also have a robust implementation of TensorFlow, and so if we're serious about doing good data analytics, so we want to make sure that we're using the best tools available out there. So that's why it's kind of fragmented like that. Obviously, it would be fantastic to be able to develop our front end, our server, and our data analytics all with the same language. But for the front end, there's just nothing that beats a native experience. And so that's why we went with Swift on iOS. And Node.js is just really robust for building out APIs. And I just come from that background myself, so that's what I was just comfortable with starting there. And then Python is really just a great language for data analytics.
I'm loosely familiar with the subject, but you mentioned pandas, you mentioned TensorFlow. Are you using those for analytics, or are you doing some kind of machine learning involved with BestSelf?
So we're doing both things. I mean, we're doing kind of simple correlations and regression analyses, but we're also working on machine learning in almost all aspects of what we provide through the app. We think that we can leverage machine learning to make the experience of discovering your health and discovering important facets of your well-being just automated away by machine learning. It's really a tedious process, and I think that there's no other way to really go about it besides employing machine learning to really do a lot of the heavy lifting. There's a whole community of quantified self enthusiasts out there, me being among them. And I can say that it's definitely just a lot of work to go through your own data and try to identify patterns and write your own scripts to go through, the different kinds of data that you have about yourself. And I mean, that's just the de facto, like the first case you learn about, a perfect use case for machine learning.
I have a follow-up question to this as well in the
Yeah.
Python space. So we did a Python episode with MongoDB a while back. Which method of development are you using with Python to interact with MongoDB? There's a few options.
So right now we're just using the standard PyMongo driver. We don't really need that much, specialty kind of anything out of that. We're looking at transitioning to the async driver at some point, but right now that's just not a priority.
Big shout out to Shane and Prashant who maintain the PyMongo driver. We had them on a recent episode. So if folks are listening in and wondering about PyMongo, check out that episode. You'll get to meet the folks that actually maintain that. They're awesome. So you mentioned Swift, and I've been diving very deeply into Swift lately, both on the server side, which is fascinating, server-side Swift, as well as for iOS. And I'm finding that it is almost perfect implementation of a language because it's compiled, so it's blistering fast. It gives you all of the types that you could imagine that you could need, as well as prototyping and extensions, and just having a blast with that. But I'm curious, why would you not? What are you using? Let me put it this way: what are you using to store data on the device?
Honestly, at this moment, we're just using a really simple cache that we built out ourselves, but we're not storing too much on the device itself, because otherwise we generate so much data that it would start adding up pretty quickly.
There's a little product by the name of Realm that
Yeah.
That we maintain that you might want to look at it. It's phenomenal for this problem space because it relieves you of the hassle of worrying about sync. So Realm Sync gives you the ability to just kind of create the objects and modify them in code, and all of the rest is managed for you behind the scenes. Whereas in Core Data, I don't know if you've worked with Core Data, it's basically like operating through a trash bag. You need to like you need to modify things and then push out your changes, and that can be a giant hassle. So
Yeah, we definitely looked into using Core Data, but it was just so opaque to even get started with. It was just not worth our effort to get into that. And then, like I mentioned, we were looking into Realm really seriously before, but we didn't want to get stuck in that ecosystem. We wanted to be able to use something like MongoDB in our Node.js server, in our data analytics Python pipeline. And so maybe the timing was like a little bit off. You guys should have acquired Realm a few months earlier. That would have changed.
So I imagine that you're storing potentially sensitive information in your product. With that in mind, are you, say for example, HIPAA compliant, and how are you managing that within MongoDB in your application?
Yeah, we definitely think privacy is not only a massive concern for people, but it's a massive concern for us. We want to make sure that people feel confident and that their data is in fact safe. And so we've spent a lot of time making sure that our database implementation is HIPAA compliant. Even though that's not necessarily what's required, we just want to go above and beyond so that people know that, as best as, the standards get, we're implementing safety, in everything that we do and everything that we build so that people's data is safe. So we are completely HIPAA compliant. Yeah.
So are you making use of the field level encryption offerings that MongoDB offers, or are you doing something else to secure the data?
We're making use of field level encryption. Yeah. We're also storing data, no identifiable data with people's health data, completely separate. And we just have a pseudonym that links the two. And so, a breach of one would never imply a breach of the other one and things like that.
So this is a fascinating space, and I've seen a number of, I guess, wearables pop up, like Whoop is in this space, and and a couple of other similar products out there. How did you get involved in this? Were you just interested in this space and started learning about it, or tell us about the beginnings?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Like I mentioned, I'm actually a physics student, right? So it's not really what you would expect to be starting something like this. But it all started actually when I was gifted an Apple Watch. And I was so enamored by it. It was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm like going up to everybody, check out my heart rate. Like, oh my God. And then like 2 weeks into it, I realized, well, this is basically useless. My heart rate last Tuesday doesn't really matter to me right now. There's no point to any of this. But coming from that physics background and doing a lot of data analytics courses and things like that, I knew that, well, there must be a lot of patterns and things in here that we can discover about ourselves that could actually be useful. So it really started from that gifted Apple Watch. And from there, I just had the idea of like, hey, well, we need to do something with this data. It's just sitting there. Let's try to do something with it. And so that started off first as a personal project, but I then pursued the NSF's I-Corps program. I'm not sure if any of you are super familiar with it, but basically it's just NSF funds you to go and conduct customer interviews, customer discovery interviews. So we just talked to people from all walks of life, well over 100 people just during those few weeks that were part of that program. And we heard from a lot of people that they've used self-tracking apps or wellness apps before, but they don't really find that much value in it. There's one story I like to tell of this woman who she got a Fitbit and she used it for about a week. And then she discovered that, hey, I can actually reach my step count if I go out and eat at this one location during lunch. That's not even something that she thought of. Like the place that she chooses to go to lunch has an effect on her health. And so she was, fascinated with that. And she kept using the Fitbit for a while. But after a while, she didn't really discover anything else. So what's the point of even using it? But it's there's a lot that we can learn. And so that's really how this whole project started. And I think we've developed an approach that's, more intuitive. And we're really focusing on making sure that people get those kind of new insights all the time. And so, you don't get bored of using this thing.
So what's next for BestSelf?
Yeah, so we just launched and we had a pretty small beta. We only launched it to a few kind of people that we knew and on a few sites. But the feedback that we got was really positive, and people found that it was a lot more intuitive and enjoyable to use than a lot of the other things out there, just because you have to navigate menus. And this is as simple as it gets, basically. We use the approach of clinical psychology. It's just a simple questionnaire. I mean, it really doesn't get any simpler than that. So we use some machine learning to curate the questions for you. You get to select which questions you want to keep track of. And then you fill out a questionnaire whenever you feel like it throughout the day. And so we think that this approach is really beneficial. And there's been research done, not using an app, but using just kind of regular pencil and paper technique like this. And it's found that it's been actually really beneficial, particularly for students, and making sure that students kind of see the connection between the actions they take and their academic and personal well-being. So we've partnered with some of the faculty at Florida Atlantic University to run a pilot study of BestSelf on around 5,000 students there. And we're going to be analyzing how the kind of daily use of BestSelf affects their depression, anxiety, and stress levels. So we're going to see if the approach that faculty have developed using pencil and paper transitions well into a use of a mobile app. And we really have high hopes. I mean, college students are really on their phones all the time. I can definitely attest to that. And it's just a lot more convenient to be able to whip out your phone literally no matter what you're doing and just answer those questions instead of having to sit down at some point and really go through it. So so we have that study lined up, and then we're looking at launching our Android version in the next year, and launching our API and hardware partners program also in the next year. So we have a lot of things lined up. That study's the first major milestone that we want to achieve, and we want to show more than just take our word for it. No, these are actually the results, and this is how it can help people.
How are you funding this?
We've bootstrapped all the way up to this point. We're exploring the potential of bringing on some investors at this point. We're actually part of the Florida Atlantic Tech Accelerator program. And so that's kind of part of it. But frankly, if we could bootstrap, forever, that'd be great. But obviously bringing on some capital would help us accelerate and, hit those milestones a little quicker.
What else do we need folks out there to know about BestSelf?
If there's one thing that people should take away from, what makes BestSelf different than other things on the market right now, is that we're not looking at giving you a guide. We're not trying to tell you how you should live your life or how, what steps you have to take to reach your best self. We're not telling you, hey, this is our diet plan, follow this thing. We're simply giving you the tools to examine it for yourself so you can see, hey, my coffee drinking is impacting my sleep, or maybe my exercise is impacting my anxiety levels, good or bad. I mean, it's the research out there is really that there is no best diet for everybody. And so we're really trying to create something that just helps people discover themselves and who they are. And we think we've made something that's really unique and intuitive from that perspective.
How has your research and the product itself impacted you?
Yeah, I can say some stories about me and my two friends that have been using it pretty regularly since like the first build. Especially in the era of COVID, it's really important to just keep track of how you're doing. Sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day of everything. Especially now, it seems like we're running to a different Zoom call about every hour. So my one friend, just he felt fine day to day, but he noticed he got in a report that his self-reported happiness was down 16% over the last month. So something was clearly off. And it's just those kind of small moments of self-reflection that I think are really, really the crux of the benefit there. And my other friend, he found out that his traffic sentiment, hey, there's tons of traffic, had a massive impact on how the rest of his day went. In fact, if he didn't have self-reported great traffic, like if it wasn't completely clear, he was having a shitty day. That's what was going to happen. And so just those kind of little moments that, maybe now, when he's having a bad day, he'll reflect, okay, well, maybe it's actually just traffic was bad. Maybe I should just calm down and, things are okay. And just those kind of little tweaks that, you don't have time to notice, or it's just difficult to notice in the day to day.
Wow. I think I need your product.
Well, you can definitely feel free to check it out at joinbestself.com, or just find it out on the Apple App Store.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you all the success in the world. It sounds like a phenomenal project, and it sounds like you're doing really well from a business perspective as well. I would love to extend an offer to have you participate in our community. There's a special channel for startup participants, those folks that are in the startup space. I'm sure there's going to be a number of questions that other startup founders and CEOs will have for you to find out how you've gotten to the point where you're at now. And so if anybody out there is listening, is the community forums are open there. So anything else before we begin to close out?
No, I don't think so. I just wanted to extend a big thank you to you guys. MongoDB has been a pleasure in terms of developing, but also you guys have been a real pleasure to be part of your startup program. So thank you so much.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. You can get more information on the startup program at mongodb.com/startups. And David, thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Have a question or a suggestion for the show? Visit us in the MongoDB community forums at community.mongodb.com.